welcome everyone, and welcome Scott too. Happy to have you tonight. My name's Nick DiStefano. I'm the president of the Boston chapter of UXPA. And tonight, as part of our monthly speaker series, we have Scott Kubie going over change is a feature, effective strategies for communicating product changes. And before we get into tonight's talk, just going to do a little bit of housekeeping and a bit of a warning too. If you see a black tail come across the screen, that's just my cat. And then I mentioned it in the chat already, but if you do want to post anything up to the chat, make sure you have it set to everyone, just so we can all see. And if you have any questions as we go through, feel free to put them out in the chat or use the Q&A button. And I'll be keeping an eye out, and we'll be reviewing those at the end of the talk too. And just a reminder to be kind to everyone present. We have a code of contact too. Just be respectful to everyone when you're doing your comments. And then if you're interested in seeing other talks for our monthly series or for past events too, you can check out our YouTube channel. QR code is in the corner of the screen too to help you get there. And similar thing too, we have a few upcoming events both for this month and next month if you want to check those out. Next week on Wednesday, we're going to be doing another one of our monthly socials. For now, weather and temperature permitting, we're going to go to the Down East Cider again in East Boston. If it ends up being too cold, we're going to try out Timeout Market in Fenway, and I'll send an update and adjust the event accordingly. But just to give everyone a heads up on that. And then November features World Usability Day. So we have a couple events in accordance with that going on globally. We have our annual UX Fair, which is going to be focused on anyone new to UX, pivoting, or student or recent grad. We're going to have a panel focused on navigating the job market, how to present yourself, how to handle interviews. So there'll be a panel discussion around that and some opportunities for one-on-one time as well. And then the theme for World Usability Day this year is cooperation, collaboration. So we'll be having Zachary Gabbert as our monthly speaker talking about peer design practices on World Usability Day. And then another thing we like to do, and you can use the chat for this as well, if you're hiring, if you're looking for work, put any info you have to share in the chat too. And also we have a jobs board on our website. That's where the QR code will go to. Same thing with the URL. And then we also have a Slack group for the jobs channel too, which is free to join. So if you check out uxpaboston.org, you can sign up there. And with all that being said, I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker, Scott Kubie, leading voice in content strategy and UX writing. Scott's an independent designer, writer, and digital strategist. He's also the author of Writing for Designers, from a book apart, book about how to get the UX writing done on design projects. And Scott's helped teams worldwide create better experiences and happier customers by applying insights from the world of content strategy, content design, UX writing, and information architecture. So we're happy to have you tonight. And yeah, Scott, it's all yours.
Hey, all right. Thanks, Nick. Happy to be here. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, or if you're watching later, thanks for being interested in this and taking some ownership over your own career. So I'm really excited to be sharing this material. This is one of my weird, I do a lot of talks. I talk a lot about content strategy, UX writing, content design. And then even within that already nerdy oeuvre, I have a special nerdy interest, which is in change logs and change communication and sort of those little moments where the software that we have goes from being one sort of thing to another sort of thing. So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you all today, as I remember to actually share something. So share my screen, get those slides up there, and hopefully we're in good shape. Nick, are we seeing our slides okay?
Yeah, I see it fine.
Wonderful. All right. So this is called Change is a Feature. If you only take one thing away from the presentation, I hope it's that. That's why I put it right into the title. I've been revisiting this material after first giving a talk at the Information Architecture Summit in 2012. So I've been collecting screenshots on this since 2011, which means that some of it might be a little distracting that the UI and some of the screenshots here is like a nostalgia throwback. So hopefully that's a little fun. I think the principles are still the same. I've been collecting this stuff for a long time. And part of the reason that I've been doing this is that I sort of have had a reverse career of a lot of folks on the content side of digital experiences, in that what we now call UX writing is what I really started doing. I got involved with an app startup and was writing interface text for iOS apps and Android apps. And eventually, as the App Store economy evolved, found myself writing change logs and app store updates and descriptions. So just to give you a little bit of a background on where I'm coming from on this. So first, a rhetorical question. If we were all in a big room together, I'd be inviting you to put your hands up and expect that no one would. Who is working on something that will never change? Anyone? Anyone? No, it's a trick question, right? Like if you're working on it, something is changing. We're making some updates to it. When I got started in my career, I was at an app startup, so very new at the time, 2011, 2012. We're delivering updates over an app store, very, mobile-centric experience. And then I went to work at a big, old-fashioned, if you will, software company that was just about to make a cloud transition. And they still shipped software in boxes. They had a whole museum of them. They were just kind of coming out of there, let's put it in a box and send it to our customers. And sometimes those boxes would come out once a year. Sometimes it would be a few years. And what would be in the box would change a little bit. And that was pretty normal. I've been using computers for a long time. I remember I still have like the serial number for Windows XP that everyone had eventually for LAN parties and the like memorized. So lots of like getting software on disks, having a whole, it would be an event when there would be a new update to a game and that kind of thing. And so change used to be a lot more static. Now it's a lot more commonplace in our products. We have continuous deployment, software as a service, which we abbreviate as SaaS now. Mobile apps with Delta updates that are changing, they're installing automatically and you don't even opt into it. And a lot of teams feel, and a lot of organizations feel, that change is something inherently scary or difficult to manage. And the argument that I'm making in this presentation, I hope you'll start to agree with me as I go along, is that change can be scary, but change is also a primary feature of our software. We can think about change very positively. It's one of those kind of undocumented features. The implicit promise of software as a service is that you don't have to go through that rigmarole anymore. You don't have to have IT take disks around or have everyone bring their computers in for updates. It just kind of keeps changing and updating and improving over time. So if we're going to think about it like a feature, an inherent quality of our software, of our products, I invite us to consider, what's the benefit? And the kind of instinctual idea is like, well, it's always getting better. It's always, always, always getting better. Sort of. We'll talk about that for a little bit. So if change is a feature and there are benefits to that feature, if it's something that is happening all the time in our product, I have found that communicating about those changes can help our users succeed in using our products. So for the most part, communicating change is something that aids user success. You can probably imagine some reasons why yourself right now. If you used to know how to do something and the developers change how it works, now the knowledge that you had no longer has value. So they need to communicate. If they communicate to you how to keep doing that thing, that's going to help the user be more successful. There are exceptions to this. I will talk about some of the exceptions to this. A lot of teams, though, I find kind of just punt it, right? It's like, we were asked to make the updates. We're not really the technical, isn't like change communication, isn't that like documentation, isn't that the technical content team? And anyway, why would we talk about it? Because the old way sucks, friends. We're making it better. Change and the quality of it can be pretty subjective. You probably aren't making update. No one is trying, I mean, I wouldn't say no one. Most people logically are not trying to make their products worse. We're trying to make them better. So if we're trying to make it better, why would we even talk about how it used to be worse? Let's just talk about how it is now. The thing is, change creates difficulties for your users, even if you've made the interface better. You have to do the work to communicate about it. A lot of folks who've been in software design for a long time have found that even if things are kind of not so good, broken, janky, jerry-rigged, whatever, people like the way that those things work because they're familiar with how they work. I got to take a cab ride one time after a conference with Steven Anderson, a great designer who writes a lot about interaction design and sort of guiding people through experiences, and how he'd worked on a project for an airline and how difficult it was to have conversation, to even broach the conversation with the ticketing agents who used the old monochrome computers with the keyboards, no mouse controls, to even introduce the idea that they might change anything. People tend to like the way that things work. So familiarity solves a lot of usability problems, as does documentation and clear communication. Another reason to communicate about change is that, especially today, remember, I've been doing this talk for over 10 years now, versions thereof. It didn't used to be the case that things would change without you knowing. A computer and the software and the operating system, it was a pretty static thing. You really had to opt into making those changes. But a lot of software delivery processes, including Agile, developed before everything was a web app. So we need to be thinking about and embracing change as a new key feature of our products. I might be dating myself a little bit here. I'm curious if anyone is familiar with this acronym. You'll find it on Stack Exchange if technical support people are talking to each other. This was kind of a pejorative. A lot of my friends in high school worked tech support at different companies, right? The local telecom company. RTFM, read the effing manual, is the sentiment of, if you don't know how to use the software, just go read the manual. And we used to be able, I mean, it still wasn't a healthy attitude, but we used to be able to have that attitude because it was all documented. The challenge now is that we're not documenting so much. And if we want people to read and understand our software, we have to write that effing manual, right? So back to that first job I had, the app startup, 2011, 2012. Writing that manual, documenting what's happening with our software, came down to me as an assignment at work. I had to write my first ever changelog app store description. And so I thought, well, all right, I'm just this dope from Nebraska with a degree in radio. And now I'm working at a software company. I'd better go see what all the big brands are doing. Let's learn what change communication looks like from the pros. And I found a lot of this. Bug fixes. Ooh, Spanish localization and bug fixes. These are separate updates, by the way. More bug fixes. Oh, Pandora. Remember Pandora? Is anyone still using Pandora? I heard an ad for it the other day. Very strange. Minor bug fixes and improvements. I might as well get this as a tattoo. I see it when I close my eyes. It's so, so common. I've seen it everywhere. And it's not just an old-timey thing. It's very, very common. This is pretty recent. From Wise, they make like some sort of USB security cam that I have. Look at these options. We've updated the UI. Ooh. Added, all right, new notification. Good to know. I don't know what auto unlocking improvements is, and bug fixes. This is a security camera. I would like to know what the bug fixes are. What were the bugs in my security camera? That is kind of alarming. And so the more I dug into it, the more I looked around, I just started to see it everywhere. And so I'm reading all of these for research, yes. And also I find myself still today in 2023 reading change logs and descriptions, in part because I don't necessarily trust, and this is just me as a consumer, not as a designer here, I don't necessarily trust that every change the software team is making is in my best interest. And I just want to know what is happening. So the less trust you have with your users and consumers, the bigger your market, the more people you have that probably don't implicitly trust you, the more you have to explain your decisions, just like in any relationship. So you can listen to me about this. You can listen to Apple about this. This is in the iOS Human Interface Guidelines or some version thereof. Now, consider describing specific bug fixes. If a new version fixes a bug that users cared about, that's a good thing to talk about. I definitely recommend it. So hopefully you're on board already. If not, as we continue, you'll start to see changes to feature. It's valuable to communicate about it clearly. I want to offer a couple of things. I'm going to do, what do I got? I got 2 frameworks, beginner and intermediate, if you will, or advanced perhaps, and some specific best practices about change communication. I'm looking forward to questions. I want to talk about this in context. There's always, it has to be a contextual decision, who your users are, what they know about you, what you've changed, what you're trying to accomplish, and so on. But I've been able to boil down a lot of it into what feels to me like a relatively repeatable framework. And I'm going to share that right now. So how do great teams communicate about change? It tends to be at least in these 3 ways. To successfully communicate about change, you have to talk about what's happening in advance, especially if it's a big change. You need to talk about it in context, in the context of use, where the user is with the app, the software, the experience. And in perpetuity, I've been looking and looking and looking for a word that means the same as perpetuity that begins with an E, so that this could be the ACE framework. I think that would be cool. So if anyone has a word, please let me know. I haven't found one yet. But we want to communicate in advance, in context, and in perpetuity. Let's talk about each one of these. So communicating in advance. If you let people know that something is going to happen, and then you follow through on that, you are building trust, right? To tell, then show kind of approach. Say you'll do it, then do it. If you've ever been in for some kind of procedure, or even just visiting the dentist, I find that people who are interacting with you in a way where you might be anxious, they tend to do a really good job of communicating in advance just before they do something, right? You're going to feel a little tickle. You're going to feel a pinch. I just got my double vaccines, flu and COVID. Get your vaccines, people. Right? You're going to feel a little pinch when this goes in, 1, 2, 3. So it helps build a little trust. It relieves a little anxiety so that the change isn't coming completely out of nowhere. Where and how you communicate change is going to depend on the channels you've developed and the relationships you have with your users. So if you have some sort of platform where you can post, if there's, I'll make some recommendations here in a moment, but any of the kind of common channels, if your users are aggregating somewhere, if you have a company blog, you can preview what is about to come, tell them about some of these changes, maybe even get some feedback before it's permanent to avoid some disasters. So some ancient updates from Evernote about a new web client that they're rolling out, detailing for people what to expect. You can do this in small ways too. I don't even remember what this app was because it was 2011, but look, they're letting us know what you can expect in future updates. So even in the current change communication of this change log, we're telling you what's going to be happening next. So you can do it in small ways, even if you've got a rapid development cycle, if you don't have a lot of channels or notification pathways built up with your users, doing a little bit of foreshadowing. It's not going to reach everyone, certainly, but it might take the edge off. And if you have some eagle-eyed users, maybe they're IT managers for someone who's doing deployment, someone who's helping an older parent manage their phone or devices, a little bit of context and advanced warning can go a long way. I would definitely prioritize this kind of advanced communication if you're taking something away from folks. So you can do this in an app. This is an example from Tinder. I don't remember what moments were, but if I had cared, they're getting rid of them. If you want them, you better get them now. This kind of communication can help break roadblocks for development teams who are like, well, how could we possibly change this? The users are already dependent on it. And I find that the teams that get stuck more are the ones who are less advanced in their change communication tactics. So if you're building communication pathways into your app, into your digital experience. You can roll out stuff like this, hopefully with a relatively low lift. You don't want to have to put out a whole new version just to be able to communicate that a future new version is coming. So putting that kind of stuff in can be really valuable. You can use traditional channels like PR. Anyone remember Quickster? I feel so old now. The DVDs are dead now. Sorry, it didn't last all the way through to 2023. But Netflix was going to split at one point. There's going to be Netflix and Quickster. So they announced it, big media announcement, in advance change communication. Everyone flipped out, value of the company tanks. And it's like, you know what, nah, we're not really going to do that. We're going to wait until, 2023 to do that. So communicating in advance. Just a few examples of that. We'll talk about some more advanced techniques later. Communicating in context. This is really important for task-based things, which probably a lot of us are working on. And I'm talking any kind of task. If people are coming in to do a thing, whether that is order food, get their work done, do some math, apply for a loan. If someone is used to using a thing, especially if they rely on that thing, or they have built some patterns of behavior around the thing, you might need to put up a little warning, some sort of something in context to really help them notice that things have changed. So pulled this off from Reddit ages ago. Right, we have an in-context communication that this room, maybe it was a lounge, maybe it was a closet, I don't know, but it's not the room that you thought it was anymore. And if you weren't expecting to walk into a men's room, hey, friend, heads up, in-context communication. You see a lot more of these days, which I'm happy about. I think our apps generally, especially web apps, are getting a little bit more sophisticated. Google, in my experience, has always been really, really good about this. And you see these types of call outs pretty often. I've also been parts of teams who have found these types of call outs in other apps really cool. And it is the heavy lift of their lives to get something engineered in a way, to get some sort of something added. Usually it's an additional layer. Now we got all kinds of JavaScript nonsense running. I'm not a developer, sorry, right? But you're adding all the stuff that my blocker that's trying to keep my web pages from being garbage, all the stuff, all those additional layers. And a lot of the times these things are not engineered right into the applications. And I really like this one, note that dismiss button. I'm going to talk about that again in a little bit. You might be thinking, well, we don't really have layers and panels and all of these kinds of notifications. How can we possibly communicate change? Craigslist, this is a hill I will die on, is the best designed website on the internet, still today, always has been, no nonsense. And if they want you to see that something has been updated, how common is this for so many brands that your privacy policy or your terms of use have been updated? A little new symbol right there. You're thinking, well, Craigslist, they're so, it's so pedestrian. It's blue and purple links still. Would a sophisticated marketing forward brand do it? Sure. Here's a nice one from Mailchimp. New updates to the campaign manager. So again, in context communications, what I really like about both of these, they're not interrupting my flow. I came here to do something and I don't have to dismiss this. It's not even in my way. It's just drawing my attention if I'm curious. I use Button Down for email, one of the 2 email clients that I use for sending newsletters and such. This is pretty common pattern, but I find that indie developers, when it's a 1 or 2 person shop, surprise, tend to do a little bit more human and friendlier job of this. So no visuals, no screenshots, no animations. I don't think those would hurt, but it's simple. And it's still using language that is kind of helping to guide me through the experience. If you look at some of the bullets here, they're talking about how, hey, this one panel, you're going to find that in the upper right corner now. This other thing you're looking for, it's going to be at the bottom. And for me as a customer and user, highlighting this change, I don't send emails all that often. I sign in once, I like to send them once a week, but usually I'm in there once a month, right? And I'd kind of been burned the last time I had used button down because the draft that I was working on didn't automatically save. So I have this sour taste in my mouth about an otherwise excellent product. I sign in again. All right, well, let's just send another email. Third bullet point. They're letting me know about something that's really important to me, increases my perception, my loyalty, my reason to stay. Pretty common pattern anymore with new versions. It gets a little tedious if all of your apps update at once. You want to think really carefully about whether you have done enough changing to merit this kind of in-context notification. But for this version of day one, which is a journaling app, they're drawing out and highlighting a lot of new features within the version. So this is it on desktop. Here's a similar update from the previous version on mobile. A point update in between with some kind of complicated messaging about what's happening with iCloud. Oh God, everyone remembers this nightmare when like all the iCloud syncing stuff was changing. That was a very fraught time where my notes kept disappearing. Apple, I forgive you. So again, in context notifications, using the app itself as a channel to let people know a little bit about what's going on. I think this is a nice thing because I don't know about y'all, but I get way too many emails from way too many brands about stuff I don't really care about. All these loyalty programs that I have like 0 points and 0 balance in. And I think it's nice if your customers primarily engage with you through an app, let's maybe just talk to them through the app. Let's not worry about email. Okay. In context communications can really help with discovery. Apple tends to take a minimalist approach to their change communication, sometimes too much in my observation. But here we have a couple of changes in iOSs of yesteryear where they point out a feature you might not have discovered on your own. So it just feels as ordinary as chicken soup to me anymore, right? Just having my phone open and boop, pulling down to open Spotlight. You had to learn that at some point in time. And so on the left, there is a communication about that. And then it's much better now. This was actually a bad update, in my opinion, the one on the right. But they had moved kind of all the now playing controls within the music app. Again, you had to swipe. How are you going to discover a swipe? Sometimes you just have to tell people. That's kind of the trade-off of having, uber minimalist touch-based controls. Nice simple one from Discover. You can do this in finance apps as well. Just some things about, hey, here's a new feature that we have. You can do it here. I personally like, as we'll see in the next example, I like real visuals and screenshots as opposed to illustrations. That's just less translation, especially if you're moving quickly, as most users are, because I didn't open this app to read your news. I opened it to do something. So you see these tours everywhere, Android, iOS, web apps now alike, desktop software. They can get a little tedious, yes, but I have seen sometimes it's just because they're not very good and teams don't really work that hard on them. Think about the production considerations here. This is a banking app. It's a business banking software. You've got to get the designs done enough to be able to screenshot and illustrate everything, to get it into production, to ship with the same release that the updates are part of, if that makes sense. So I like the highlighting here. This is simple. You didn't have to do any new illustrations. You're just kind of guiding me through, showing me, here are some things that have changed in the interface. It's not skippable, which I don't love, but we try. Here's one that is easy to dismiss. This was some magazine reading app that I had. But I like this kind of thing where if it is important, or if you just really want to draw attention to it because you're proud of it and that fits your strategy, sort of a mnemonic phrase I use a lot is hard to miss, easy to dismiss. Hard to miss, easy to dismiss. So let's make sure they see it. Let's make sure it's not too much of a pain in their butt, that they can get rid of it quickly. Similar, hard to miss, relatively easy to dismiss or complete. The shading that you're seeing here, this is Tumblr from yesteryear. And that shading is part of I didn't alter this at all. So they have new terms of service. They need you to opt into them. So they're showing you, hey, you're not in the wrong place. Tumblr is still here, but sorry, friend, we need you to do something. Look, ideally you work with your legal team. That doesn't have to be this onerous in the first place, but if this is what you end up with, all right. So you put it right there. Again, make it easy for someone to dismiss or to get through. Another example from LinkedIn. These, to me, sorry if you worked at LinkedIn, this is a yawner for me. The 3 across, all right, here's our 3 new features. Start a conversation, reach out for advice, stay in touch with your network. Abstract graphic, abstract graphic, abstract graphic. Who is going to slow down? Oh my, I'm being welcomed to a new, more effortless conversation. Let me, oh, come on. You're not going to dig into this. This is going to be very skippable in my opinion. So the nuances, the particulars of the content design that you do, I think matter. I'd mentioned before Google. I love the way that Google does change communications. We'll see some more examples from them. This is an app in their Google Workspace service. Again, it's a little tour. It kind of moves you around, highlights some things. At any point, you could click out of this, but it's not. The challenge with a lot of the Apple ones that I find is it front loads it, right? Which is like a basic Nielsen Norman group, Jacob Nielsen's usability heuristics. It's asking the user to remember things, carry information from those screens into the new experience. I think it's better if you can build in a sophisticated way to do this kind of layered communication, guide people around the experience a little bit. So those are some in context examples. And in perpetuity, this is the advanced mode. Documenting change for the long haul. Hopefully if you have a relatively sophisticated operation, if you have documentation and technical support folks, hopefully they're helping you with this. This is good. It's good for everyone, friends. If you've been the writer at a company that doesn't do a lot of documentation, it's really challenging. I find myself when I'm working for a software company, as a UX writer or content designer, I'm looking at the documentation a lot, making sure to understand kind of the history of how a feature has evolved, how people might still be using it today, what language has been in use in the product in the past, that sort of thing. Documenting in perpetuity, somewhere that people can look up. It's good for your PR. It's good for your search engine results. It's good for bloggers to be able to find updates, especially if you have any kind of fun or entertainment brand. My goodness, if you have a game, that's gold. So some examples, documenting in perpetuity. Like I said, you can just write something, put it on your blog. You have it there. You have a little bit of history. Here is what we had. Here is what we've changed it to. It's helpful. Someone might be coming back to this product. Maybe they were hiking in the wilderness for a few months, and now they're back to using your software, and they're like, what are all of these changes? Can someone please get me up to speed? World of Warcraft, similar games, right? This is a massive part of their communication strategy. It's very strange. Now, granted, gamers are a little more enthusiastic. There's more discussion around the product, but it's strange to me that these software products, games that make a lot of money, a lot more money than a lot of other software as a service products, they all seem to think this is really valuable. A lot of other brands don't. I think that's something to chew on. So games, entertainment brands in particular, they tend to make an event out of new releases. They do videos, documentation around it. Some of the more sophisticated software teams I've been part of do that kind of thing as well. They'll have a full product marketing release and a push. Maybe you got TV ads that go with it. That kind of long form, big picture thinking, I think, can be really useful. And you can document things in perpetuity in small ways without adding new channels. Stacking update notes. Maybe someone is jumping a few versions from 9.0 to 9.2, what have you. You could use space that you already have and roll back a little bit, give people a little bit more context. I think this is a really nice pattern. If you release a couple of updates in close proximity, you'll have to figure out what that closeness is. If people are looking at your stuff every day, maybe you go back a few days. If you're put updates out within a few weeks, that might still be worth it for your team as well. So That's kind of the basic mode. Not that it's easy, but just the core ideas. Communicating change in advance when it makes sense to, in context as much as you're able, and in perpetuity to help people out. So I didn't have an example of this in the perpetuity section, but something that comes to mind for me. A lot of the time, we don't think about the fact that we are already documenting our software in perpetuity. And where I've seen some launches go awry, some deadlines get kicked forward, is we don't really consider the fact that all of these wonderful, positive, user-centered changes that we've made, someone else has to go through, take screenshots of all of that stuff and update all of the documentation about it. So just a little shout out for our support friends. Don't keep giving them emergencies. Think about the communication in perpetuity in advance. So an intermediary bonus tip: if you don't have a lot to say, or if you do have something to say, but it's not that important, at least have a little fun with it. This is not that helpful, this Amazon update, but at least it is a human being speaking to me and not a developer saying minor bug fixes and enhancements. So if you have a fun brand, you can have fun with it. Here's one from Plants vs. Zombies. I know people think Slack invented this. Slack is great communication. They did not invent fun change logs. Sorry to burst your bubble. Here's one from Foursquare: being conscious of the time of year. Happy holidays from the team. We squished some bugs, etc. So being human can mean communicating in a friendly way. I would say that being human also means, like, just, I don't even know what to say about this guy. Don't do this. Don't be Max. Don't be HBO Max. We've been dying to tell you the good news. You're getting everything you love to watch on HBO Max, plus the best in true crime, reality, food, and home, all for the same price you pay today. Pretty great, right? Mark your calendar. You'll have access to Max as soon as it arrives on May 23rd. This is not human communication. Who wrote? A marketing robot wrote this. It says nothing. Why am I marking my calendar? Who says what is great? This was, look, it was rushed. I'm sure everyone working on this did the best they could, but you get a lot of this kind of inflation from a marketing voice, where you should have had content designers at work, in my opinion, and things like this, right? Get the latest and greatest features. Trust us. What features? List the features. Say something. Say something. So no fun. So motivating. Okay, so be a human being. All other content design, UX writing considerations are part of this as well. Some advanced techniques on your change communication. If you're able to communicate cross-channel, multi-channel, omni-channel, whatever word you like, give people a choice. This is a complicated one. We'll talk about it. And if you have one, engage your community. So some quick tips there. Crossing channels, communicate change where your users are. A lot of people have automatic updates. They're not looking at change logs. Some people don't have notifications enabled from your app. How are you going to reach them? Sophisticated teams, in my experience, tend to build multiple channels to reach people where they want to be reached. You can have a newsletter. You can do online, social media updates. Some teams carve out special social media channels just for their most engaged users, people who maybe are going to ask the most questions and waste the most of your resources. So finding ways to reach them. If you are an indie developer and you're just doing a web app or a mobile app release, one product, one thing, one place to get it, set up a free website. Let people connect with you somewhere. A lot of companies have been doing this over the years. Twitter, now X, probably not the best place to do it since people have to pay to see anything on there anymore. Is the last, I don't have an account there anymore because my God. But you know, you want to get it to a place where people are really going to see it. You're going to have to go through your insights on your customers and how you tend to talk to them. If you have a Slack community, something like that, awesome. Pour one out for Glitch before it became Slack. Missed this one. So pick somewhere to talk about it that's not just in your app, if you're able. If it's X, if it's a Reddit community, if it's a big update, maybe you want to do some PR, try and talk to some tech blogs about it. If you have platforms or message boards, I think it's always nice. Any channel that you have to reach users, having something that has sort of an update-like quality, a news-like quality to it about an update, it can help, even if you don't end up doing detailed documentation about the change, that sort of description of what has changed from version 1.5 to 0.6, 0.7 can help people troubleshoot over time. Really cool, sophisticated technique. This is going to require some advanced product and project management, but it seems to yield the best results and the least user revolt, which is to give people a choice, let them feel like they are choosing to change. So this is from a while back when Gmail did a big update. Google does this a lot with a lot of their products. It's really impressive. Letting you revert to the old look, go back to the old version for a little while. Sometimes it's a few months. Sometimes they keep it up for a year or so. But if you think about it, this isn't just aesthetic. That familiarity that I talked about, where people want to protect things from change. Maybe they're going to love the new version. Love it, love it, love it. And you released the new version the week that they got to really get some shit done. And they're not in the mood to learn where everything went. They just want it to work the way that it worked. So if you're able, rolling releases out in a way that lets people either opt in or temporarily revert from the changes can be really, really powerful. And if you do it that way, what some brands have been able to experience over time is that the new version that people were initially going to resist or revolt, or at least just complain about for a couple of weeks before they get used to it, they're going to be eager to get it. They're going to be saying, how do I get the new version? How do I update to this? My friends are showing screenshots from this thing and I want the new thing. More of a social effect, a network effect, but it does happen from time to time. Instagram, Meta doing this as well, giving you a chance to sort of switch to their new messaging platform. You can do it or you cannot do it. And I like this one from LinkedIn, giving you, like, they have a new feature, which is, I mean, come on, but it's moving to more of a chat-like interface in their messages. Fine. This is a big change, right? You don't want to accidentally send something to someone when you hit return because you're trying to make a new paragraph. So they do turn it on by default, which I personally don't love. It doesn't feel like a choice in that way, but they're at least drawing my attention to it, giving me a chance to opt out of it, switch the feature right there. I think that's pretty cool. Similar pattern for some Dropbox updates. Moving now, moving later, changing how my files are stored. Pretty cool. So further sophisticated update. If you make other people, your users, your customers, part of the process, they might communicate change for you. Sometimes teams will work with influencers or key customers. You see this a lot with like hardware companies, I think really understand this, right? They send out demo releases. The film industry sends out screeners to people in advance of things or invites them to special showings. You sort of involve people in the change. And if they earnestly like it, then they're going to be part of communicating about that for you. And I think that can be really nice. Even easier if you have a brand that is communicative already, if you're on some kind of channel, some Reddit apps, Alien Blue of yesteryear, Apollo most recently, rest in peace, both of them, they've already got people on a platform where they talk about stuff. Let's talk about the product updates right there. Trello, masters of this run, they would run basically a public Kanban board. They got feature updates on a Trello board that any of their users can access, vote on things, ask questions about upcoming features. This one is about Trello, but you could do something like this for your product as well. And having a community to engage can be really valuable. It can save your backside if something goes wrong. Back when Instapaper was a one-person shop, Marco Arment, a release came out and something was broken with it. And so there were a lot of one-star reviews saying, hey, please fix this. So they fixed it. New release, talking to their audience saying, look, it actually really matters. Could you, if you like this app, if you're happy that I fixed this for you, please go change your review, engage in the community, because it affects sales, it affects engagement there. So those are some of the advanced tips. Communicating cross-channel in more than one place. That's all I mean by that. Giving people a choice if you can. If you can't give them a choice, communicate in advance as much as possible. Be thoughtful about the timing. And if you have a community, engage them. If you don't have one, friends, a really great job to have at your company is community manager. Start building one, and you'll have some of these opportunities as well. All right, a few closing thoughts here from me. Communicating change tends to aid user success. And over the last decade or so of talking about this kind of stuff, I've found myself, it's funny, like when people come to the talks and the workshops, they're usually working on like pretty serious, big product changes. They have important things to communicate to their audience. And so it's like a really easy conversation. I'm able to point them to some best practices, give them a little bit of guidance and direction on how they might approach it. But at a bit of a further remove, maybe just in a Slack community that I'm in, someone will come in and say, hey, I'm looking for a little help. We moved this thing from this tab to this tab, and I want to know how to communicate that change to users. And I'll ask them, like, how do you know, or what do you know about whether or not users knew where it was in the first place, right? Is it going to be a noticeable difference? So a really important question to ask people before you, oh no, I lost my slide. I'll just have to say it with my mouth. The really important question to ask before you communicate about any change is, who gives a shit, right? Like you really want to know, is anyone going to care about this? Yes, probably you want to if you've moved a thing, you want to look at your support. You want to know, did we used to explain to people that the button is here? Now we need to explain to them that it's over here. But a lot of incremental updates, really small stuff, especially like subtle UI changes. These brands are constantly wanting to tell me about their refreshed UI. And I'm like, all right, let's go look. It's like, oh, well, the buttons are either rounder or less round than they were before. What do I care? Why are you wasting my time with this? So ask yourself, who gives a shit before we do all of this work of communicating about the change, but do have that conversation earnestly. Some of your changes are going to warrant a lot of communication. And some of them I would be very interested, if you're not already doing kind of active user research and usability testing, see how familiar with the current version people are. There are some if you have something that's very uncommonly used, like signing out of an account, changing the expiration, updating your credit card. Those are things most of your users are probably doing once a year? Very infrequently. Moving that stuff, changing a little bit about how it works, maybe you don't really have to talk about it. So have that conversation. So change is a feature. Yes, if you want to communicate effectively the way that some of these brands have and some of these examples that I've shared, the funny thing is change really needs to be a version 1 feature. The brands I find that don't do this very well, it's not because they don't want to or they don't see the value of communicating about change. It's that they created no affordances for it. They have no method of contacting their users. They have no communities. They have no channels. It would break the UI to add any kind of notification banner. There's no accounts or messages center. So they have to tack stuff on. And then we get this very like Homer Simpson car, all this stuff stitched together experience just to do something very basic, like update our customers about what has changed in our experience. That's all I have to share in a formal way, friends. I'm looking forward to some conversation. My email address and website are on the screen, and it is coming up very soon. But if you like this topic, if you want to learn some more hands-on stuff, do some exercises with me, see a lot more examples, I'm teaching a workshop at the Button conference, which is going to be online in a couple of weeks, go to buttonconf.com, and you can learn about that. That's all. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for this. One question that came to mind when you brought up, well, banking and calling out sort of the more legalese kind of text. Do you have any tips or success stories for how to navigate balancing like a more conservative legal approach to what you're describing, or like how to make it more digestible for someone who isn't really in the weeds about the thing?
Sure. Yeah, that can be a challenging thing. The thing I have found over time, and I've probably been guilty of this earlier in my career, but I find that a lot of practitioners that I talk to, designers, product managers, writers, especially sometimes, have this anxiety or fear about talking to legal, right? Oh my God, are we going to have to talk to legal about this? And it encourages this kind of adversarial relationship that maybe is not really there. So overall, I think the earlier you start to talk to these folks and talk to legal and build a rapport and a relationship about the topic, the more success you're going to have. Where it seems to go wrong is well-intentioned greenhorn product managers default to, let's see how far we can go before this catches their attention, and maybe we'll get away with it, right? Maybe we won't have to ask legal, which is just, it's a very risky perspective, frankly. So that's one advice. One piece of advice. My other piece of advice is that you're going to want to share something with them, right? At some point, you have to share a document, Figma, Google Doc, whatever it might be, like as part of the conversation. Do not share it with edit access. They mean well. Lawyers, legal teams, in my experience, are used to getting things and then like fixing them. That is their orientation to it. So if you give them a chance to add feedback without making it a structured conversation, without planning a meeting, without putting an agenda and a presentation together, well, of course they're going to tear it apart, because that's what they're supposed to do for the company. Is if they see rough draft text and there's things they don't like about it, they're getting that red pen out, they're fixing it, they're changing it, and they're telling you how it should be. And you haven't even really given them a chance to gain the appropriate context. So yeah, like it has to be collaborative. You have to see legal as part of the design team on this, not as some like extra tall final hurdle on the work that you're doing. You're definitely going to bang your head on that hurdle.
That makes sense. And yeah, in terms of everyone else too, if you have questions for the chat or the Q&A, or if you want to raise your hand too, I can let you talk and verbalize your question too. And then in the meantime, I've been noticing it a bit more often. What do you think about the ones that kind of play more, I guess, with their release notes and changes? And it almost, sometimes they seem to be less change logs than just like something fun that they're trying to do.
Yeah.
In their
Yeah,
messaging.
it's interesting. I think you need to know your audience, and that's where strategy comes in, right? If what you have learned over time is, on balance, it really genuinely seems like no one is reading these things, right? So maybe your Slack has some pretty fun change logs that they do. But almost everyone has Slack open 27 hours a day, right? Like this app is just always open on your computer. And so they have little notifications, what's new, you can click on it, they're right there. They have a chance in context constantly to communicate with you. The Slack bot can talk to you and say things. And on top of that, they are publishing their apps to app stores. Those app stores have change logs that collect over time, and that potentially people like me, design bloggers, thought leaders on LinkedIn or whatever, maybe they're going to look. Maybe they're going to look in a detailed way to see what's really new with Slack. And so if you know those things about your brand, why not treat it as an opportunity? Write something fun enough that it's going to get attention and that people are going to pay attention to it. Maybe they'll talk about it. And that kind of advanced strategy I've talked about of engaging your community. I've never worked there. I don't know what their strategy is with that, but that would be my intuition, is that you could potentially be using that as, a little bit of blog fodder. And maybe you've decided tactically that journalists and UI, UX thought leaders on whatever are your audience for that. And sure, write something for them. I would caution, still try and describe anything that really happens in case anyone is relying on it. Don't bury, you can't be so silly that people are alarmed. My God, please stop with the April Fool's Day stuff. Don't pretend that things are changing that are not actually changing. But yeah, if you know your audience, why not have some fun?
All right, and then we had a question come in. What are your thoughts on handling when users kind of revolt or react negatively when there's a change? When to take that more seriously versus understanding that people are more just kind of generally hating change?
Yeah. I think it's a wonderful question. Thanks for the question. It is the more confident you are going in about your design decisions. And I don't mean confident coming from a place of bravado or ego, we're geniuses and we've made the most amazing change ever. But the confidence that a user-centered designer should have, which is, we tested the shit out of this thing, right? We watched people use it. Maybe we even piloted it with 10, 100, 150 users, got feedback over a couple of months, and we already know that people will adapt to it and that people will really like this change and that it is a better way to use it. Then you can just give them some Southern hospitality, right? And smile and just take it on and write it out, and you want to listen, sure, but you're going to be able to weather that a lot better. Whereas if you're going in without that kind of research, if you haven't tested anything, if you don't have any feedback, and you don't have to have a super sophisticated operation to do that kind of thing. You can do cafe testing with paper prototypes. Sit in a Starbucks, offer $10 gift cards, spend an afternoon there. One designer, one writer, UX researcher, and product manager, whomever it is, get feedback, do task testing to see, can people accomplish this stuff more effectively? Now you know you are making a good change. So you can write it out in tandem with some of the tips in here. Know that people are going to grumble a little bit, but if you're communicating in advance, if you have documented it, if you're picking a thoughtful time to do it, right? I didn't talk about that one as much, but if you have something that people use in an e-commerce context, like small businesses, if I'm WooCommerce and I'm about to do, or Stripe or whomever, I'm about to do a huge change, I'm not going to roll that out in September or October as people are gearing up for Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales. Maybe I'm going to do that in February after the return bust, right? So knowing your brand, knowing your audience, what those cycles are, can help a little bit. I guess the other side of all of this coin, be open to the fact that maybe you've messed some stuff up, right? If you're getting a lot of feedback, especially if it is obviously substantive, right? So if you have users who use assistive devices and they're saying, hey, this new version is not accessible, you effed up. And you need to admit, there's a whole other talk to be given, I think, about like what to do when you've effed up as a software company, how to make it up to people, how to like, what kind of provisions do we have for reverting changes and that sort of thing. So having a program in place to listen, knowing what you're going to do about feedback before you launch, I think ultimately is the most important thing.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And then I know a lot of this has kind of been on the external or consumer side. What are your thoughts on for documenting or conveying, that change and the reasons why internally?
Yeah, so like an external change and communicating about the external change to an internal audience, like to other people in the company about what's changing.
Yeah, like I know, I've seen instances where someone just kind of comes in and just like, all right, I see you made this change. Why?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole other art to that. I hope that it's something that, depending on your org structure, that the executive sponsor is leading with, of communicating with other people in the organization. Hopefully it's been collaborative enough where you're like, if it's a substantive change or if it impacts other areas, hopefully those people have been part of the work, right? You've involved them or interviewed them at some point. But if nothing else, like, I think what ends up being true often is you have, okay, so let's say you've got like a big software as a service platform. And just for argument's sake, you've got, wait, I'm in mirror mode. Okay, so you've got team A, B, and C, major feature area A, area B, area C. So you've got these three big areas. Any given customer might use each of these features, but some customers are more A, more B, more C. And you're going to make a big change in area A. I think a thing to consider is that like there may be channels of communication or types of users in category B and C that those teams know a lot more. And what's strange is that those customer types are probably the least familiar with your feature set. So the things that you're changing and the way that you communicate about those changes with them, there may be some nuances to it that your team doesn't know. So that's just one example to illustrate that I think like having a road show and involving people and like, when I was at a big monkey themed email marketing company for a couple of years, we were rolling out this big new feature area, whole new thing, brand new to the product. Company had never had one before. I was there for just over a year and a half. I think I watched the same deck get presented to different audiences 20 or 30 times about this thing that we were building. So it's like, tell them again, and focusing on the vision of where we were going, which was not going to be in version 1. I think that's the biggest thing to watch out for is if like your whole team is driving towards this one big vision, but that vision is probably not all going to be there in your first release. And it's like, it'll really take the wind out of the sails if like, it feels to you like man's first step on the moon and everyone else, like knowing that the goal is like to colonize space and have people living on Mars. And they're like, what do you mean? They're just going to like get off and walk around the moon for a little bit and come back home? That seems lame. Like, why did we even do that? So considering people aren't like as immersed in it as you, and you have to like tell that big vision story over and over again, make videos, make proof of concepts, like, do some storytelling, but like anything that can like, I think help get that vision shared more than the nitty gritty details ends up being a pretty good approach internally.